The Aethelgard was a masterpiece of galactic engineering, or at least, it used to be. Now, it was nothing more than a drifting tomb of cold steel and flickering lights. Deep within the dead sector, a region of space where stars had long ago burned out and even the echoes of old empires had faded, the massive cruiser sat paralyzed. On the bridge, Captain Kale stared at the holographic display. It was bleeding red. "Status?" he asked, his voice cracking with exhaustion. "Life support is at 12%, Captain," the systems officer replied, his scales turning a dull gray, a sign of extreme fear among his kind. "The crystalline core has shattered. The engines are dead. We are drifting into a gravity well. In 6 hours, the Aethelgard will be crushed." Kale looked out into the infinite blackness. There were no nearby planets, no trade routes, and no hope. The dead sector was a place where things went to be forgotten. Still, he pressed the emergency broadcast button one last time. "This is the Aethelgard," he whispered into the void. "We have 3,000 souls on board. Our core is gone. We are dying in the dark. If anyone can hear this, please." Silence followed. Minute after minute of agonizing, soul-crushing silence. Then, a sound erupted that shouldn't have been possible. It wasn't the musical, synthesized chime of a Galactic Union ship. It was a harsh, rhythmic thumping sound, static, raw, and unrefined. "Is that a signal?" Kale gasped. A voice broke through the speakers. It sounded deep, gravelly, and strangely calm. It spoke in a dialect of Gal standard that was clunky but clear. "Aethelgard, this is Elias of the salvage ship Iron Spirit. I'm picking up your screaming. You guys sound like you're having a real bad day." The bridge crew froze. "A salvage ship? Out here? Elias?" Kale shouted. "We are losing oxygen. Our core is destroyed. We need a fleet, a tow ship, anything." "Whoa, slow down there, Captain," the voice replied. A faint sound of metal clanking against metal could be heard in the background, like someone was dropping a heavy bag of coins. "A fleet is 3 weeks away, and you've got about 5 hours of air left by my math. I'm only 20 minutes out. I've got a welding torch, a crate of spare parts, and I haven't had my coffee yet. Just keep the lights on for me, or at least leave the door unlocked." "You don't understand," Kale stammered. "Our technology, it is beyond a simple scrapper. It is ancient, complex." "Buddy," Elias interrupted, and Kale could almost hear the man grinning through the static. "It doesn't matter if it's ancient or alien. If it's got a pulse and it's broken, a human can fix it. Hang tight. I'm coming in hot." Far off in the darkness, a small, battered ship with glowing orange thrusters ignited, racing toward the dying giant like a spark in a graveyard. The junkman's entrance. The docking bay of the Aethelgard hissed as the atmosphere stabilized. Captain Kale stood with his elite engineering team, all of them draped in glowing ceremonial robes, holding high-tech diagnostic pads. They expected a savior in shining armor. Instead, the airlock door groaned open to reveal a cloud of oily smoke and a man who looked like he had been crawling through a coal mine. Elias stepped out, dragging a heavy, battered metal chest that screeched against the polished floor. He wiped a streak of black grease across his forehead, leaving a smudge on his tanned skin. Around his waist was a belt sagging with heavy, iron-colored tools, wrenches, hammers, and things that looked like prehistoric torture devices to the refined aliens. "Air's a bit thin in here," Elias grunted, tossing a small, glowing stick onto the floor to check the gravity. "But I breathed worse." "You are," the engineer, the chief tech officer asked, his 4 eyes blinking in disbelief. Where is your nanobot repair swarm? Where is your molecular synthesizer? Elias patted a massive, rusted pipe wrench hanging from his hip. Right here, pal. And I've got a bag of grade A American duct tape that can hold a moon together. Now, quit staring at my boots and take me to your engine room. We're burning daylight, and your life support is wheezing. As they hurried through the grand corridors, the aliens watched in silence. Elias didn't look at the beautiful crystalline architecture or the gold-plated walls. He was looking at the ceiling, listening to the vibrations of the ship. He stopped suddenly, leaning his ear against a bulkhead. He pulled out a small ball-peen hammer and tapped the wall. Clang. Clang. Thud. You've got a hairline fracture in the secondary coolant line, Elias muttered, moving again. About 50 meters that way. It's leaking liquid nitrogen. Fix it with a patch, or your floor is going to shatter like glass in 10 minutes. The chief tech checked his holographic pad. His face turned pale. He's right. But, the sensors didn't even flag that yet. Sensors tell you when things are already broken, Elias said, kicking open the massive doors to the core chamber. A human ear tells you when they're about to break. Inside the chamber, the great crystalline core, the heart of the ship, lay dark. It was a massive, translucent shard that usually hummed with blue light. Now, it was cracked, surrounded by alien technicians who were weeping in despair. It is over, the captain whispered. The crystal is fractured. It cannot be repaired. It requires a star forge to heal. Elias walked up to the multi-billion credit alien masterpiece. He squinted at the cracks, chewed on a piece of gum, and then spat it into a nearby bin. He reached into his heavy chest and pulled out a bottle of thick, foul-smelling chemical resin and a roll of silver tape. Your problem is you think this thing is magic, Elias said, rolling up his sleeves. To me? It's just a radiator with an ego. Get back. This is gonna get loud. The aliens watched, horrified, as the human engineer climbed onto the sacred pedestal, pulled out a power drill, and began to work on the most advanced technology in the galaxy like it was a broken pickup truck. The spark of spite. The engine room was silent enough to hear a heartbeat. The alien technicians held their breath as Elias did the unthinkable. He wasn't using lasers or harmonic stabilizers, he was using a handheld grinder. Sparks showered the pristine floor, dancing off the sacred crystalline core. To the aliens, it looked like a barbarian was desecrating a temple. Stop, the chief tech screamed. You are scarring the lattice. If the vibrations are off by even a micron, the entire ship will vaporize. Elias didn't even look up. He was focused on a deep, jagged vein in the crystal. Your lattice is just a fancy circuit board, and right now, the circuit is broken. I'm not scarring it, I'm cleaning the wound. He reached into his bag and pulled out a handful of copper wiring and a small, humming device that looked like it belonged in a junkyard. He began stitching the cracks of the multi-billion credit crystal with the crude metal wires. It looked ugly. It looked messy. It looked entirely human. You are putting dirt into the heart of our civilization. Captain Kale whispered, his voice trembling. I'm putting a bridge where there used to be a gap, Elias countered. He stood up, sweating through his jumpsuit, and wiped his hands on a rag. Now, here's the thing about human tech. We don't wait for things to be perfect. We make them work because they have to. He connected the final wire to a portable battery pack and stepped back. Clear the area. If this doesn't work, We won't live long enough to be embarrassed about it. Elias didn't press a touch screen. He reached out and delivered a sharp, heavy kick to the base of the engine housing. Thump. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a low, guttural growl started deep within the floorboards. The copper wires began to glow a fierce, angry orange. The crystalline core, once a calm blue, turned a violent, pulsing violet as it fought to process the raw, unfiltered energy Elias was forcing through it. Suddenly, the lights on the bridge didn't just flicker, they exploded into brightness. The hum of the life support systems didn't wheeze, it roared. The power levels. The systems officer shouted, his 4 eyes wide with shock. They are at 140%. The core is stable, but it's angry. It's moving faster than the design allows. That's called overclocking, pal, Elias said, picking up his hammer. Your ship was built to be elegant. I just taught it how to fight. But the celebration was cut short. A massive alarm blared, a sound so loud it shook the teeth in Kale's head. On the main view screen, the darkness of the dead sector shifted. A shadow even darker than the void was moving toward them. The Void Stalker, Kale choked out. The ancient predator of the sector. It smelled the power surge. We are a sitting duck with no weapons. Elias looked at the screen, then at his wrench. No weapons. You've got a massive engine and a hull made of reinforced alloy. In my neighborhood, that's not a duck. That's a ramming speed. The Predator's mistake. The Void Stalker was a nightmare made of obsidian and jagged edges. It was 3 times the size of the Aethelgard, an ancient biological ship that fed on the energy of dying vessels. As it closed the distance, massive harpoons made of bone-like material readied themselves to pierce the alien cruiser's hull. We have no shields. Captain Kale shouted, gripping his command chair. Our defensive arrays were fried when the core shattered. We are defenseless. Elias was already moving, his heavy boots clattering toward a secondary control terminal. Defenseless is a state of mind, Captain. You've been looking at this ship like a piece of art. Start looking at it like a giant battery. The human engineer began ripping panels off the walls, exposing the thick bundles of glowing fiber optic cables. He didn't use a terminal, he used his pocket knife to shave the insulation off the wires. What are you doing? The chief tech cried out. You are bypassing the safety limiters. The hull will become electrified. Exactly, Elias grunted, sparks dancing off his goggles. You guys use plasma shields that require perfect geometry. Humans. We like the stay off my porch method. I'm rerouting the entire output of that overclocked core directly into the outer hull plating. The Void Stalker lunged. Its massive tentacles wrapped around the Aethelgard, and its jagged beak prepared to tear into the metal. But the moment its biological skin touched the ship, a blinding flash of white-hot electricity arced across the void. The Predator shrieked a sound that vibrated through the very atoms of the Aethelgard. The black ship jerked back, smoke rising from its charred tentacles. It had never felt a meal bite back before. It's circling for another strike, Kale observed, hope finally flaring in his eyes. But it will learn. It will find a weak spot. Not if we give it a face full of junk first, Elias said, a wicked grin spreading across his face. Captain, tell your pilot to vent the aft cargo bay, the one filled with all those old engine blocks and scrap metal you guys were going to throw away. Vent the cargo? That will create a debris field. No, Elias corrected, his finger hovering over a manual override lever. In a vacuum, debris is just a bullet that doesn't need gunpowder. When I give the signal, you're going to use the engine's exhaust to push that scrap. We're turning your trash into a shotgun blast. The Void Stalker opened its massive maw, preparing a beam of concentrated dark energy. It was a killing blow. Now! Elias roared, slamming the lever down. The cargo bay doors blew open. Tons of jagged, heavy metal scrap flew into the path of the Aethelgard's massive thrusters. Elias throttled the engine to its absolute limit. The blue-violet fire of the core acted like a giant piston, slamming into the debris and launching it at relativistic speeds. The shotgun blast of scrap metal tore through the Void Stalker's soft interior like a hot knife through butter. The ancient predator didn't just stop, it began to drift, its dark lights flickering out as its internal organs were shredded by worthless human junk. Elias wiped the sweat from his eyes and exhaled. First rule of the junkyard, boys, never bring a fancy tooth to a scrap metal fight. The human gambit. The Aethelgard groaned as the shockwave from the dying predator hit them. The ship was free from the stalker's grip, but the cost was high. The internal alarms changed from a steady beep to a frantic, high-pitched scream. The core, the chief tech yelled, pointing at the holographic monitors. The overclocking was too much. The temperature is rising beyond the melting point. We are going to become a second sun. Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed a heavy, heat-resistant blanket and a bucket of industrial coolant. Captain, get your pilot to punch it. We need to jump to hyperspace now while the core is still hot. If we sit here, we're toast. But the stabilizers are gone. Kale replied, his voice shaking. Without the stabilizers, the ship will tear itself apart during the jump. I'll be your stabilizer, Elias said, already running back toward the engine room. Just give me the signal. When Elias reached the core, the room was a furnace. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burning metal. The copper wires he had used to stitch the crystal were glowing white-hot, vibrating so fast they were becoming a blur. The entire crystal housing was shaking, ready to shatter. He wrapped the heat blanket around his arms, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the burning pedestal. The heat was blistering, but he didn't back down. He jammed a heavy steel pry bar into the alignment gears and leaned his entire body weight against it. Aethelgard. Do it now, he screamed into his radio. The ship lurched. The sensation of a hyperspace jump felt like being stretched through a straw. Outside, the stars became long lines of white light. Inside, the engine room became a chaotic storm of gravity and fire. The pry bar in Elias's hands began to bend. His muscles screamed in agony as the sheer force of the jump tried to throw him off. He could feel the heat through his thick boots. The crystal roared, a sound of pure power that felt like it was trying to rip his ears off. Stay together, you piece of junk. Elias growled through clenched teeth. He wasn't using physics anymore, he was using pure human spite. He hammered a final wedge into a slipping gear with the back of his wrench, forcing the machine to obey him. For 10 seconds, the world was nothing but noise and pain. Then, suddenly, there was silence. The violent shaking stopped. The orange glow of the engine faded to a soft, tired throb. Elias collapsed onto the floor, his jumpsuit smoking and his face covered in soot. He looked up at the ceiling and let out a weak, raspy laugh. The radio crackled. It was Captain Kale, and for the first time, he sounded like he was crying not from fear, but from relief. Elias? We've cleared the dead sector. We are in Union space. The scanners show 3 rescue fleets heading our way. We made it. Elias closed his eyes and felt the cool air of the life support system hitting his face. Told ya, Captain. Just needed a little elbow grease. The legend of the wrench. The Aethelgard didn't just arrive at the Galactic Union station, it limped in like a wounded warrior returning from a war no one thought could be won. When the massive docking clamps finally locked onto the scorched hull, the station's high-ranking officials were waiting. They expected to find a miracle of science. Instead, they found a ship held together by copper wire, silver tape, and sheer human will. As the airlock hissed open, Elias stepped out. He looked exhausted. His face was a mask of oil and sweat, and his heavy metal tool chest was missing a handle. He didn't wait for a parade. He simply sat down on a nearby cargo crate and lit a small, old-fashioned cigar. A group of high-ranking alien scientists approached him, their glowing robes clashing with his grease-stained jumpsuit. "We have analyzed the engine logs," the lead scientist whispered, his voice trembling with awe. "What you did, it violates every law of crystalline harmonics. It is impossible. How did you stabilize a shattered core with base metals?" Elias took a slow puff and looked at the scientist. "Your laws are written for labs and clean rooms. Out in the dark, the only law that matters is, make it work or die. I just chose the first one." Captain Kale stepped forward, his scales shimmering with deep respect. He held a small, ornate box containing a golden star, the highest honor of the merchant fleet. "Elias, the Empire owes you 3,000 lives. This reward is enough to buy your own planet. Stay with us. Teach our engineers your human magic. Elias looked at the box, then back at his battered salvage ship, the Iron Spirit, which was being refueled nearby. He stood up, the metal tools on his belt clinking like a cowboy's spurs. "I appreciate the offer, Captain," Elias said with a faint smile. "But I'm not much for teaching. And I'm definitely not much for planets. Too much gravity, too little to fix." He closed his tool chest and stood up. "The galaxy is a big, messy place, Kale. Somewhere out there, another ship is about to break down, and some fancy engineer is going to say it's unfixable. I need to be there to tell them they're wrong." As Elias walked back toward his small, ugly ship, the entire docking bay went silent. Thousands of aliens from hundreds of worlds watched him. They realized that they didn't need to fear the dead sectors of the universe anymore. As long as there were humans with a bag of tools and a bit of spite, the dark wasn't so scary after all. The Iron Spirit detached from the station, its orange thrusters glowing bright. With a sudden burst of speed, it vanished into the stars. On the bridge of the Aethelgard, the chief tech looked at a small piece of silver duct tape Elias had left behind on a console. He touched it with a trembling finger. "Is it magic?" a young cadet asked. "No," the tech replied, smiling. "It's better. It's human."